What secret is Damon hiding as he trains with KC? And will their heated arguments lead to more than just physical combat? Find out in this thrilling episode. Join the pack and subscribe for the next chapter of this thrilling saga. Chapter 27, just another global crisis. Damon's POV. Dude, wake up. I felt someone give me a shove and I growled, rolling over onto my stomach and shoving my face into my pillow. There was a sigh and I heard shuffling around and someone kicking a glass bottle aside. The next thing I know, the sheets beneath me are moving and I land face first on my bedroom floor. What the hell? I snapped, rolling onto my back and glaring up at Luke and Jeff. That's what I should be asking you. Luke exclaimed. What up with this? He questioned with one raised eyebrow as he ushered to the beer bottles scattered across the floor. Rubbing my face irritedly. I was just a little pissed. I mumbled, feeling a hangover coming on. My brain was already pounding against the inside of my skull and the sunlight streaming in from the windows burned my eyes. Jeff noticed me wince and seemed to understand right away what it was as he ran to close the curtains, helping the pain numb a bit. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Jeff snickered, looking around the room. It looks like you threw a party in here with all these bottles and cans, he said as he began kicking some aside into the corner. I moaned, trying to recall last night. I remember KC wrapped in that guy's arm while watching a movie in only shorts and a tank top and looking way too comfortable. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. My mind was wrapped up in a whole bunch of thoughts that I didn't want to think about. All of them very much related to KC. It got so bad that I had to drink to stop my instincts from taking over. I didn't know how much longer I could keep my wolf tamed. I was just pissed. Let's leave it at that. I growled, not wanting to go deep into the subject. What time is it anyway? Slowly clambering to my feet, still a little wobbly beneath me. 2 o'clock, Luke replied with a smirk. KC and Dan were looking for you when you didn't show up for that training thing this morning. Ryan ended up covering for you, he informed as he crossed his arms, leaning against the wall. Damn, Dan was furious. He laughed, Jeff chiming in. Where's he now? I questioned, not really knowing exactly why I cared. Cheers at them all, Jeff grunted, obviously finding that funny, but I was just confused. Jeff noticed the look on my face and added, the girls dragged him with them. That makes sense, I mused, slowly heading towards the bathroom while trying to think where the damn aspirins were. After fumbling around the cabinet in the bathroom for a moment, I finally found them towards the back and popped a few of them. An hour earlier, KCSP. Ovi, so I can guess you two are going to the dance together. I laughed as Amber ran to Hogden after training had ended up. Without Dame and trying to mess things up, it went really smooth. The pups finally learned something. If I could trade Damon for Ryan for training, I would do it in a heartbeat. At least 8 years actually cooperative. Are you kidding? Amber giggled, pulling Dan's arm around her shoulders. I swear that is the most stupid question that has ever left your lips, she said as she pecked a kiss onto Dan's cheek. Whatever, I mused. I'm surprised you two were nominated for the stupid Queen and King, and the moment I said that Amber's eyes were practically bulging out of her head. The prom is Friday, she gasped, making Dan to look at her with a curious expression. Yeah, so Dan shrugged carelessly as I just stared at my spot stick friend peculiarly. You'd think he'd be used to this by now. We have to get dresses. She squealed, grabbing my arm and quickly dashing for the house. You could just tell by the look on her face she was using the pack link to tell Maggie and Danica what she was all wild about. The next thing I see is Maggie, Danica, and Dolly running out of the pack house with pale faces. "You guys are such girls," I yelled at all of them once Amber stole him down. They just gave me a look before Maggie grabbed my other arm and began forcefully dragging me towards the car. "Dan, move your butt," Amber called back to him as he started running after us, a fearful look on his face claiming that he knew he was going to get into trouble whether he didn't or did come. "Guys, it's a stupid dance. We have dresses." I argued with them, trying to plant my feet in the ground and stopped, but they just pulled harder and rolled their eyes at me. "KC, it's senior prom. To a girl, a dress is everything in this dance is where school lives are forgotten and guys only see the girl and then the beautiful dress on the dance floor," Danica lectured, as she walked steadily behind me. I crammed my head around to stare at her, not knowing exactly how to respond to that. "Wow, that was so deep," Amber said just as she pushed me into the back seat of Dan's car before she climbed into the passengers. Danica climbed into the far back and Dolly and Maggie jumped into the row with me. "My God, Dan, you are so freaking slow." Amber shamed him as he climbed into the car, taking his time in inserting the key into the ignition. "I don't see why you guys are so anxious about stupid dresses," he shrugged as he began pulling out into the main road. "Oh Lord, here we go again," I thought dreadfully to myself with a shake of my head. Simultaneously, all the girls erupted into yells and shuns and shames and explanations as Amber smacked him upside the head. "I get it." Dan barked over their noise, giving Amber a stern look that instantly melted once their eyes locked. I knew Dan was forgetting that he was driving the moment I began to lean towards Amber. "Hey, Romeo." "Eyes on the road," I snapped, flicking his forehead and making him jump in realization what was going on. "Thanks to my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." He stuttered as he turned onto the highway. "Yeah, thanks to my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." Amber pouted, clearly disappointed that she couldn't wrap her arms around how he was driving a freaking car. "Anytime," I simply smirked, sitting back in my seat and staring out the window in silence for the rest of the time till we got there. "No, it's totally not your color," Maggie said, making me spin once in the stupid yellow dress. "Thank you for agreeing," I exclaimed. "I look like a freaking bee." "No, you're more of a wasp," Dan chuckled while Annika and Maggie tried to muffle their laughs. "Real funny, you go try on the next one," Amber instructed, ushering me back into the changing room, but I just stood there and rolled my eyes with exhaustion. "Come on, Amber, this is like the 12th dress I've tried on, and I hate every one of them," I said a little too loudly. "Though wear skirts and dresses to clubs and stuff, but not this," I complained as I clutched the thick and puffy bottom part of the dress. "Danica, Maggie, and I have already found our dresses. We're just waiting on you and Dolly to find one, and we're not leaving this mall until you to find one," Amber said with great determination, Chopperfillig smutch. I sighed as I turned and walked back into the dressing room, struggling out of the yellow dress and into the next that Dan had found for me. "I hate it," I stated before I even came out to show them, staring at the full-length mirror in front of me and frowning at the person that looked back. "Come out so we can see it," Danica called, and I murmured a curse under my breath as I exited the little room, watching Dan's face turn bright red as he struggled to not burst out into laughter. "Absolutely not," I hissed as I crossed my arms across the frilly pink breast of the dress, feeling like I had been eaten and spit out by a cotton candy machine. "I know," Dan cackled. "But I just wanted to see you wearing pink." He pulled out his phone and snapped a picture before I could even register what he was doing. "Delete it now," I snarled, baring my fangs at him. He hastily shook his head as he stuffed his phone back into his pocket, pulling Amber in front of him like a human shield. "Babe, delete it. Please," Amber pleaded, turning around and winding her arms around his waist. Instantly his irises were consumed with black and his face was taken over by a look of lust. He was completely oblivious to the fact that Amber was snaking her hand into his back pocket, pulling out his phone and deleting the picture she'd placed on his neck. "Thank you," she sang as she stuffed the phone back into his pocket and pecked another kiss on his lips, Dan looking lost and confused. "Next dress," I huffed as I slid back into the changing room and pulled on the next dress. "Oh my gosh, Ollie, that's the perfect dress," I heard Danica breathe. I poked my head out for a moment to see Ollie wearing a gorgeous purple dress that reached her knees. It was strapless with a silky brighter purple sash around the waist that glistened with crystal sequins. The bottom slightly puffed out with a mix of light and dark purples and scattered sequins glistened in the light. It completely complemented her complexion and her short ebony hair. Looking spiffy, Dan complimented and Amber and Maggie agreed with nods of approval. "You look awesome, girl," I beamed at her. She was practically shrinking back into the changing room with embarrassment, clearly not used to many compliments. "Thanks," she murmured quietly, quickly retreating back into the safety of her dressing room. "KC, are you ready yet?" Danica asked, adjusting herself in her seat so that she faced toward me. "Yeah, I guess, but I'm not sure about this dress," I practically whispered to myself, cautiously slipping out into the hallway. Gasps came from both Amber and Maggie and Dan whistled, earning him a flick in the temple from Amber. "It's perfect." Chapter 28 Intense Attraction Amon's P. O.V. "Dan, how far did Ben say to go out?" I asked carelessly, feeling the soil sink between my toes as we walked through the woods. "Not even 2 miles deep." "He doesn't want us going out more than 3 miles, he informed, staring around intensely, surveying the area for rogues. I was starting to get sick of their scent lingering on my territory. After spending a full night breathing in that stank, I was about ready to chase them away a moment, but I knew I would just be setting myself up for trouble, either from the rogues or from the council. They do say there's a reason wolves hunt in packs. You know, I can't even remember how many times I've heard my parents tell me that. And tell me again why he doesn't want us shifting. Annoyed that I was walking through the woods in only a pair of shorts just in case I needed to shift. Dan the same. Because our scents aren't as strong in human form. He doesn't want the rogues to detect us just in case we get too close. He stated like HES explained it 100 times. I rolled my eyes in irritation. Clearly he doesn't trust us then, I muttered, guessing that he thought we'd be stupid enough to get close to their den in owl forms. Dan just made a hum sound that meant he was barely listening anymore, aiming his attention towards his senses. As a friend, Dan was decent, but as a beta, he was extremely useful. His senses were more heightened compared to that of the average werewolf and came in extremely handy. "Tell me, Damon," Dan glanced over towards me. "What do you have to gain by bringing KC lower than you brought her 5 years ago?" He questioned casually, like he was starting a conversation about the weather. "Go to hell," I remarked, not caring enough to even continue the pointless topic. Dan chuckled as a smirk played on his lips. "You could use a mate like KC." Dan continued anyway, ignoring the hard glare at him. "She'd know how to put you back in line." He grinned in my direction before adding, "and in more ways than one." I looked at him curiously, not seeing what he was trying to get at. "What the hell are you talking about?" I growled through clenched teeth before returning my gaze ahead of me. "Amber's a lot smarter than I had originally thought," he stated with an odd glimmer in his eyes. "Not only does she maintain the job as a mate, A growl of pleasure ruptured from his chest. But she also keeps up the role as a beta female, even though it's new to her. In not having the stupid conversation with you, I snarled, then realizing that we were almost to our maximum point. I didn't say you had to reply. Dan shrugged. I just wanted you to listen. Not much of an actual conversation now, is it? I threw another annoyed glare in his direction that was accompanied by a warning growl. I didn't say anything more as we circled around and headed back towards the pack house, Dan thankfully not attempting to start another conversation on the way. We were just reaching the end of the trees when girls' laughter filled the air, a grin finding itself to Dan's face. I rolled my eyes, knowing exactly who those girls could possibly be. You throw like a freaking human. KC cackled. I stepped out from the forest to see KC running across the empty space of grass with a football clutched tightly in her arms, grinning wildly back behind her at Danica as she ran. I take that to great offense. Danica screamed after her, kicking up speed. KC just stuck, a tongue out childishly at her eyes beaming with entrance and mischief. That plus the sweat beading off her forehead and the military green shorts and white tank top she was wearing was just enough to make my wolf yearn more for her. Yeah, stupid, KC joked. It was supposed to. With that, she threw the ball down at the ground just as she ran across a line that was drawn in the dirt, apparently symbolizing a goal post. The moment she looked up, her eyes connected with mine and her grin instantly vanished, replaced with almost a mix between slyness and disgust. Back from patrolling already? It's not even noon. KC grinned, walking towards Dan and I with her fists pressed to her hips. Maggie, Danica, and Amber right behind her. You can only patrol so far these days, Dan just aired as he wrapped an arm around Amber's shoulders. I rolled my eyes at his dry humor before glancing at KC, raising my eyebrows in interest when I noticed her staring at my shirtless figure, taking in every muscle ridge and groove. See something you like? I smirked down at her, watching her forcefully tear her eyes away before she glared up at me. Compared to Justin, not much. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience and enthusiasm. Her lips slightly twitching downward at the mention of her ex. Oh, you mean the one who couldn't get enough from just one girl? I retorted, watching her jaw clench tightly. What the hell is that supposed to mean? She demanded, crossing her arms defensively. Oh snap. I heard Maggie mutter under her breath before the people around us began cautiously backing away. I don't know. Watching her eyes begin to flare with anger. Maybe just that you didn't have enough goods to supply the demand. I smirked humorously, her arms starting to tremble with outrage. It's no wonder your father didn't try hard enough to stick around and see his little girl grow up to be nothing but a worthless tool. And that was just the icing on the cake. If I thought KC glares could kill before, then the one she was giving me now was cruel enough to start an apocalypse. At least my dad loved me, she spat, unable to maintain her usual composed demeanor. My smirk faltered as my fist balled by my sides. My parents loved me enough to teach me how to smell 'em at a mile away. I returned. And judging on the amount of ghastly fumes that have been polluting my pack house, it's clear we have a mutt sauntering around. At least the deranged pup of a retarded, decomposing mutt. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience and enthusiasm. Feeling every word burn my tongue as they lunged from my mouth. KC was seething with primal aggression now, her lips pulled back into a threatening snarl and her eyes glowing silver while crimson pulsed around her pupils. I crossed my arms in triumph while allowing the smug grin to claim my lips in front of KC's fury, contorted face. You really shouldn't have done that. Dude, Dan whispered to me, and before I could laugh about it, KC shifted quickly in front of me, snapping her jaws as she pounced. sending me flat onto my back against the ground. Shit. This is going to get ugly. The beta sighed, and you could practically see him thinking about the occasional fights during the training classes. I grabbed a large black wolf by the neck and pushed her off of me, spinning and pinning her against a tree. She snarled and snapped at me, her clawed paws aggressively swatting out in search of flesh to dig into. Wow, I remember this used to be so much harder. I taunted KC, staring into her feral metallic eyes. Seconds after I said that, she was somehow able to cram her head down and wrap her jaws around my forearm, her carnivorous teeth tearing into muscle and grazing bone. Damn. Putting my arm to my chest and releasing KC. Big mistake number 1. She gnawed viciously, baring her razor-sharp teeth at me before she lunged again, this time her teeth sinking to my shoulder and her claws burrowing into my chest like hooks. Without second thinking it, I shifted and was able to get my arms around the back of her neck. She sunk her teeth deeper into my shoulder as I gnashed my wolfish jaws at her, able to spin over and pin her to the ground. Damon. I barely registered Dan's voice behind me as I grabbed KC by the scruff of her neck, shaking my head furiously back and forth to cause a searing pain. She yelped, but didn't let the pain show as she chomped down just under my jaw, restricting air into my lungs. I had to release her to try and gasp some air, but that was mistake number 2. She clenched down tighter and jumped up onto her hind legs, taking me with her. KC, stop this. One of the girls yelled, but I couldn't tell who as blood began rushing into my head. KC had to adjust herself twice before her hind legs were able to support her as she got her front paws against my chest, causing both of us to stumble backwards until my back collided with a tree where she was able to firmly dig her claws into my chest again. All her weight pressed against me, and her jaws still preventing much oxygen from reaching my lungs. That would have been mistake number 3, revealing my neck to her and getting myself cornered. I refused to show her how much I was struggling against her strength and bared my teeth fiercely at her, but unable to get a growl out from her constriction on my throat. Her eyes narrowed as she looked into mine, adding more pressure onto me. KC, enough is enough. Dance stormed up to us and gripped KC's muzzle, prying her jaws apart in an attempt to safely remove her lethal grip from around my esophagus. She snarled in resistance, trying to break his hold on her without hurting him. Amber, babe, some help please. He looked towards his mate with a strained face, trying to keep the pissed wolf in his arms from tearing away. KC's claws were still scratching at my chest, sending tendrils of pain pulsing through my body. Amber wrapped her arms around KC's neck and tried pulling her back as Dan still struggled to get her to release the painful hold she had on me. Come on. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I think you got your point across. Amber strived, her arms firmly locked around KC and using all her weight to try and pull her away. Dan was finally able to yank the ebony wolf off, his hands still dangerously holding her mouth open so that she didn't try to snap at anyone. He could see it just as much as I could that KC was not in control, but instead her ravaged wolf was. I fell to the ground, collapsing in a heap with a river of blood streaming from the open wound in my neck, but I bit back the whimpers that struggled to escape from the impossible pain engulfing my body. As soon as Dan and Amber were able to drag the large wolf a few feet, she stopped struggling and started breathing heavily as she began to calm down, her eyes becoming a much less intense silver, meaning that KC was winning control back. With an animalistic grunt, she shrugged the bait a couple off of her and slowly balanced herself on all fours. Her hackles rose offensively as her grey eyes bored into me before she turned and began limping towards Pack House, one of her hind legs unable to fully support her, but she was failing at trying it. The 3 girls, still shocked about what just happened before them, watched her disappear into the house, but Dan was staring at me, looking exhausted and worn out. Someone go help her, Dan ordered, and the three nodded, running after her. Dance stayed, the two of us staring at each other until he finally spoke up. KC SP. OV. The sour taste of blood still lingered in my mouth, staining my teeth. My right hind leg hurt like hell whenever I put pressure on it, but I cowed and let Damon see that I was hurt. I slid silently into the pack house, relieved when very few people noticed me sneak inside and slowly disappear up the stairs, every step causing severe anguish. I was slowly making my way up the second flight when my legs gave out, feeling weak from supporting my weight. KC, I heard someone call from behind. Attempting to stand again, I glanced back with bared teeth, forcing out a growl. Amber appeared first from around the corner, then Danica and Maggie, pausing when they saw me crouching down on the stairs. Amber quickly came to my side, but I snarled at her as she reached down to help me. "Don't touch me," flicking my ears back defensively before continuing my time-consuming limp up the stairs. I didn't need help. I was just fine on my own, but they stood close anyway. Once I made it up the stairs, my back leg gave out and I fell to my haunches and chin, my claws hooking securely into carpeting. Maggie and Danica hastily grabbed for me, trying to help me back up, but I shrugged them off with another growl. "Go away," I gnashed, snapping my jaw in their direction in warning. They only backed up a bit with concerned looks on their faces, but didn't leave. I mentally rolled my eyes, trying to move a little faster. I slunk into my room and nudged the door shut with my muzzle before shifting, a whole new wave of pain flashing through me. My head spinning wildly, I made my way to the full-length mirror, staring at my reflection the damage done. What stood out most and immediately were the already dark, almost black, bruises engulfing my ankle, probably sprained, and the area between my right shoulder and neck, darker impressions where the teeth tugged hardest. Blood reddened my lips, a dark red sliver running down from the corner of my lip to my chin, which I'm guessing was my own blood from Dan's pressure on my teeth. With a quivering sigh, I headed towards the bathroom, using the sink to support me. I ran the cold water and splashed my face with it, trying to wash away the blood and dirt. I completely ignored the fact that I was still naked, hearing cautious knocks on my bedroom door. "What part of go away, oh you'll understand?" I snapped, my voice cracking from the soreness that Damon's tugging left in my raw throat. I grabbed a large white shirt that covered me from shoulder to knees, needing something loose and comfortable that didn't agitate my body more. I just needed to keep calm long enough for the werewolf healing to start and take action. "Come on. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. We need to talk about what just happened," Amber pleaded, and I rolled my eyes in agitation. "There's nothing left to talk about," I spat, struggling to my bed and falling back onto it, relieving the pressure from my ankle. "Please, I just need to rest," I grimaced, closing my eyes and listening to my friend's fading footsteps, gratefully allowing sleep take over. Chapter 29. Time isn't God, KCSP. OV. I was just going to say it right then, and now I was the most alluring I could have been and have been living up to be. That Monday morning before school I irritably nibbled at my bottom lip as I examined the dark, slightly faded, bruising that still lingered on my pale skin around my shoulder and ankle. A pinprick of pain where it could have very possibly been sprained. My usual neck tees and skinny jeans weren't going to look so attractive on someone who looks like they were hit by a truck. Oh, and did I forget to mention my eyes were almost pits of blackness from the lack of sleep I earned the night before. Not a surprise considering I was passed out for about 3 hours, then woke up in the middle of the night with searing pains in my ankle, my werewolf side painfully healing the ligaments. I never said that werewolf healing was painless, just far quicker than the healing of a human. I ended up blending in with the background at school in a pair of light blue jeans, grey converse, and a grey and gold Ashington Wolf sweatshirt. Not so bad, especially if my main objective was to avoid seeing Damon at all. The absolute last thing I needed was to lose my boying temper in the middle of a crowded high school where a majority of the population was human. Damn. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Dan exclaimed when he approached me at my locker. You look like Steve, he said as he leaned up against the locker beside mine, closely inspecting my face. I'm sure I was also paler than ever. Healing can take a lot out of a girl. Wow, Dan. You sure know how to flatter a girl, I retorted with a roll of my eyes, stiffly pulling my books from my locker. I would summon up a wonderful reply to that cranky attitude of yours, but I really don't feel like having my eyeballs clawed out at 8:52 in the morning. He paused, giving my face another serious look. Or any kind of balls for that matter, he added when I threw him a dark look that told him to step out of my personal space. Oh goody, someone's finally making a wise decision, I joked in a monotonous voice, too tired to put much humorous effort into it. You'd be surprised how many wise decisions Danny boy can make in a single day. Dan beamed, wrapping an arm around my shoulders but only as a friendly gesture. Please, besides the fact that he was fully devoted to his mate, he was more of a silly older brother to me than anything else. Oh yes, because drinking the dyed blue water in chemistry last week was genius, I returned sarcastically, raising an eyebrow expectantly at him. Hey, I said I made many wise decisions. I didn't say they were all wise. Giving me a slight shrug. I'm not too sure many is the right word either. I half smirked, earning myself a friendly punch in the shoulder. I would have laughed if it hadn't been my injured shoulder he victimized. A wince flashed on my face before I could conceal it with a teasing grin. You okay? Dan questioned as he slowed his pace to look at me. I knew he was aware I was injured. I'm sure Amber wouldn't stop talking about my clumsy trip up the stairs the day before, but I doubt he knew exactly where and how bad. But that did lead me to think the only reason he approached me this morning was to see for himself what damage has been done. It'd be lying if I said yes. My throat tight from biting back the gasps of pain that wanted to escape. Dan kept walking with me under his arm, but carefully so to go unnoticed by the students around, pulled up the neck of my sweat to peek at the mess that was my shoulder. He quickly pulled away with a sigh, his lips pursing. That was bad, he murmured, clearly revisiting yesterday's big event. I raised my eyebrows at him. Oh really? I could have sworn it was a freaking sign that fairies were going to flutter out of the forest at any second and summon world peace. Blowing wisps of black hair away from my face. I'm glad to see your incredible sarcasm has been shattered. He chuckled. Unless you're suffering a concussion, tell me, have you been hallucinating? Now it was my turn to smack him in the chest. His amused laugh was drowned out by the bell as it bellowed us to our first period classes. See you later, crazy case. He mused as he ran off for the safety of his class to avoid receiving another smack, probably upside the head. I flashed a small grin before I turned and headed towards my own class, ignoring the screaming ache in my ankle every time I took a step. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Nothing can be as easy as that. I had barely taken 8 struggling steps before I went smack into someone's rock-hard chest. I glared up at the human wall, stunned yet frustrated to see that it was none other than Damon himself, his eyes looking like two small black caves like mine. His jaw was clenched tight and his irises were like two little abysses full of that lustful wolf I despised maybe more than the human part of him. But just thinking about that got my emotions mixed when my own wolf butted in, as if trying to take a peek at her mate through my eyes like two sisters fighting over the one person nearer. Why don't you watch where you're going? I growled under my breath, almost low enough that I didn't think he could have possibly heard, but he grunted in response as I pushed past him, pinched by that alluring little spark I hated so much, and continued my way back down the hall, feeling his eyes follow me as he stood statue still in the same spot. Wow, I thought. No snarky reply. Wood's got his muzzle tightly clenched and silent. Whatever, I said aloud to myself as I ducked into history, thankful for snuck in unnoticed while I made my way to the back of the class, quickly putting my hood over my head and hoping that it shadowed my face well enough to avoid the attention of others, especially those who are werewolf. I had a reputation of badass werewolf chick that knew her way around a car, the male species, and kick-ass moves. That was a status I would very much like to keep. "Come in," I called with a stinging throat, my voice cracking. My mother's blonde hair popped through the doorway, followed by cautious blue eyes. "Hey, honey," she smiled warmly as she slid into my room, carefully closing the door behind her. I smiled weakly in response before staring back down at my math homework. Got a lot of homework. Catching my strained look at the equations in front of me. Unfortunately, carelessly filling in answers that I thought could be right, but really wasn't in the mood to figure out step by step. "I think the teachers give you guys way too much sometimes," she chuckled lightly, walking over to the bed and sitting herself beside me. "Well, you have the righteous power to change that. You know." I raised my eyebrows even though I knew she couldn't see them under my hood at her angle. She laughed in amusement. "It's not that easy," glancing over my shoulder to see what I was working on. If she noticed I was faking the answers, she didn't say anything. "Was there something you needed?" I questioned almost impatiently, barely glancing back. I didn't want her to notice the still lingering darkness around my eyes. However, I guess whether she saw them herself or not wouldn't have made much of a difference. "Catherine, not a good sign," word spread fast around the pack house and the school. She paused to look at me, sending a nervous shiver down my spine. I was not going to like where this is going. "What were you and Damon fighting about yesterday?" It was another practice. Just a one-on-one, I blurted out in a white lie. I guess if you looked at it at another angle, it could have very well been a way to earn some bonus points in training. I know not to be trying to fight on my hind legs with a larger component and to do anything to protect my soft and weak underside and neck. Then why did the beta's son and your friend have to intervene and end it? She interrogated, making the hairs on the back of my neck still on end. She must have taken note that my eyes were wide from under my hood, and her face suddenly softened as she reached for my head. "The healing isn't going to look too great, but at least it'll be better by morning," I murmured as she pulled back my hood, taking in my paler complexion and darkened eyes. "Well, I guess all that matters is that you're okay," she sighed, stroking my hair for a second like a little girl's. "Wonderful," I said sarcastically, whether I meant to or not. It slipped out. She blew out another sigh before she stood up, heading towards the door. I know he was never the sweetest kid on the block. How do mothers know every damn thing? But time can heal, and people can change. However, it's your decision and yours alone. With that, she slipped out and sternly closed the door behind her. "Yeah, well, time can't heal the wounds inside you," I muttered to no one in particular, pulling my head back up and returning to my work. Chapter 30. A Glass Damon's P. The days seemed to be flying by. Before I knew it, it was Thursday night and the day before the dance. Like I could forget about that stupid thing. Crystal wouldn't shut the freak up about it. 1 second she'd be talking about her amazing dress and the next pushing me to be the perfect Dayton's to be king. I was seconds away from breaking up with her, but I figured she still served her purpose in making KC jealous as heck. Not that rejecting her was becoming any easier. It was getting all that much harder to control my wolf. Day by day, He was getting closer to the surface, and the day HED break free would be the biggest regret of my life. You have to wear a red tie or bow tie to match my dress, Crystal demanded, throwing a tux across my bed. I growled at it in disapproval. What makes this lower female wolf think that she could boss me around? If I wanted to wear my freaking boxers to the dance, I could. I'm sure KC wouldn't give a damn what her date would be wearing. Damn. I was barely able to keep her out of my freaking mind anymore. Daily, you'd think about her. I was about to knock my head against a boulder if she kept occurring in my thoughts. It was driving me crazy. And your hair could be wild and headed like it always is, Crystal babbled on, counting off on her fingers the list of things that will meet her expectation. The girl was hot, but she was crazy. Even a human girl sounded a bit more satisfying right about then. And don't even get me started on your shoes, she exclaimed, throwing her hands up. She pursed her hot pink lips as she ran a hand through her long, neatly kept hair. I was hoping she was finally done with her rant and was going to run off, but instead she smiled slyly. I mentally sighed, knowing that lustful look and most certainly not in the mood to invite her into bed. If that's too much to handle, baby, I could always give a helping hand, she purred as she sat on my lap, snaking her slim arms around my neck. Her short floral skirt hitched up a bit, and it almost burned my wolf to be in the close embrace of a female not my mate. I kept my face emotional, just staring at her as she looked up with me with flirtatious eyes. I placed my hands firmly on her hips and I saw her eyes light up until I jetched her off, watching her jaw slightly drop. They'll pick you up around 7:30, I stated flatly, standing and walking into the bathroom, expecting her to get the sign that I wanted her to leave. I heard the door to my room close and let out a sigh of relief. I thought Alpha was being hard. Turns out trying to make your hated mate jealous is even harder. In the mirror I noticed the swelling and scabbing had almost vanished from view around my neck, a little redness lingering. About time I was completely healed. I was sick and tired of people asking me what had happened. I had to lie and say my neighbor's dog attacked me. But I guess in some retrospect, it's not a total lie. A wild howl suddenly made my body stiffen, my fists clenching by my sides. It was high yet threatening, certainly not a call from my pack. I stormed out of the bathroom and ran to the window, staring out over the forest. My teeth were clenched tightly together, and I couldn't fight back the feral growl that was spilling from my lips. The rogues were close and they were stating their presence on my territory. They were calling for a fight. Well then, come and get me, KCSP. Ovi. Silver eyeshadow, Maddie stated with confidence in her voice. I raised an eyebrow while crossing my arms in front of my chest, shifting my gaze to Amber to see her nodding in sure agreement. But no lipstick, I replied inferently to her, watching her shoulders slightly drop. But oh no buts. You make me wear eyeshadow. I can do without the lipstick. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Please, that Danica and Dolly had half shrugged in agreement with me. Fine, but you wear the heels, right? Amber held up the silver, encrusted heels. I released a small moan. Why can't I wear my Converse? Sure, they didn't look amazing with my dress, but at least I could dance in them. And maybe kick Damon in the groin without stubbing me too. I mean, if I needed to. Oh, don't even go there, Maggie grimaced, shaking her finger at me. These heels, or you can just go barefoot, she said sarcastically, but barefoot is always fun. Well, now that that option has been placed on the table, never mind, Maggie yelled. You're wearing the heels. End of discussion. I left, running a hand through my hair. Well, it was worth a shot. Yes, sir, I joked, giving her a mock salute. "Ollie, you must wear the purple eyeshadow." Amber grinned with excitement, tossing the little compact at Ollie. The tomboyish girl jumped back away from it. "It was a great day. Let's just be glad you got me to wear a dress and those bloody heels. But absolutely no makeup," she defied, waving her hands out in front of her to dismiss the thought. "Fine," Amber groaned, grabbing the eyeshadow from the floor and placing it back on her vanity. "Lucky," I muttered to Ollie, envying the fact she's got no one to try to tease and drive to hell. If Damon wasn't around, I would gladly be going to the dance in a pair of jeans and a leather jacket, combat boots on my feet instead of those death traps. "Hey, I'm not the one running for queen," she smirked, forcing me to roll my eyes in frustration. "I swear to the freaking moon, if one of you says queen one more time I will wring your necks," I threatened, not sure whether it was exactly empty or not. Something told me that I would lose it, however, if that word popped up again. "Quen." My four friends screamed in unison, huge smiles on each of their faces, lunging for Maggie and tackling her to the ground. I growled playfully as I got my arm tightly around her neck from behind, using my other arm to twist her arm far behind her. "I warned you, didn't I?" Watching Ollie, Danica, and Amber laugh their heads off, Amber on the floor with her arm held to her stomach. "Oh, you," Maggie began, but then the door flew open. Glanced back to see Dan standing in the doorway, his eyebrows furrowing to see Maggie and I wrestling on the floor. "Do I even want to know what the hell is going on here?" he asked warily, raising one eyebrow. The four of us stared at him blankly for a moment before bursting out with laughter, my arms trembling so much I couldn't keep my grip on Maggie, and we both rolled away from each other, unable to stop laughing. "Sometimes I seriously question why I'm friends with you guys." Dan sighed as he walked over to the bed and fell back onto his butt, staring down at Amber as she was practically laughing her lungs out on the floor. "Because you love us," Danica was able to spit out between cackles. Dan just sighed, shaking his head and resting it in his knuckles, his eyes watching us continue our laughing fest. It all came to a dead silence, however, when a howl ripped through the comical air, sending a tremor through my body. Dan shot up from the bed and was out the door in a flash. That was Dan hushed Ollie as we ran into the hallway to see him standing out on the balcony, pointing his index finger up to command silence. It was as though everyone had stopped breathing, listening intently in the cool evening air. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Logan, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. They'll be coming any day now," Dan snarled grimly, his gaze still fixed on the trees. Amber moved closer to him while the rest of us stood statue still, almost fearing their arrival. "Why would they be warning us?" Maggie questioned. "Why not plan a surprise attack?" "Because they want to fight. It's not about the body count. It's the battle they want," I answered, my hands tightly gripping the railing. What else could be the reason of their warning? They want it to be a bloodbath. But here's where they're wrong. It'll be their blood that's spilt. Chapter 31, Mist in the Dark. KCSP. Oh, I stared blankly at myself in the full-length mirror, hugging my torso nervously. Yeah, so I wore some skirts that went halfway down my thigh and hot shirts in public before, but that wasn't enough to prepare me for this. My hair was pulled back to reveal my face, which had thankfully regained its color, and silver earrings dangled from my earlobes. My eyes were almost glowing moonlight silver, accentuated by the small black dress that clung to me by one over-the-shoulder silver strap, encrusted with small diamonds. The thin little thing only reached my mid-thighs, making it almost impossible for me to sit down, but I could manage. My legs looked long and slim as I stood in the diamond-decorated heels Maggie made me wear. I was actually surprised how well I looked in the silver eyeshadow the girls instructed me to apply, not that he'd ever admit to them they were right. There was a light tapping at my door and I glanced back behind me to see my mother inching the door open, cramming her head in to get a look. She slid in and stared at me in awe, her eyes brightening. I noticed she was wearing one of her work suits. I guess the principal's job is never done. "Oh, sweetheart, you look amazing," she beamed at me as she placed her hands on my arms, tears coming to her eyes. I smiled softly at her, hoping she wouldn't break out in tears now, at least not till I head to college. "Your father would be so very proud of you." She tried to smile, but her lips quivered a little, tears beginning to spring to my own eyes at the mention of my dad. "Thanks, Mom," I whispered, forcing a smile to my own lips. She quickly wiped her eyes dry and smoothed out her suit, giving me a final smile. "I have to head over to the school now and make sure everything's set. I'll see you in a little while," she said as she exited my room, leaving me in the dead silence. Blinking back my tears before walking out of my room, ready to meet the girls down in the garage. The floor seemed to vibrate beneath our feet as we entered the school gym, the neon strobe lights flaring around the room. Ollie, Danica, Maggie, Amber, Dan, and I glanced around the room in shock. Our little stinky gym had been turned into an amazing dance floor. Not bad for a small-town high school, I guess. "Cool," Ollie gasped, staring around the vibrant room in awe. "I think that's the nicest thing you've ever said about this place." Amber laughed, slapping Al's shoulder innocently. Ollie just shrugged in response with a slight nod of agreement. "Well, Mr. Smith and I are gonna hit the dance floor," Amber beamed, interlocking her fingers with Dan's, beginning to drag him off. "We are?" he questioned, however letting Amber drag him with goofy grins on their faces. "Their affection for each other scares me," Maggie shuddered, rubbing her chin as she watched them disappear into the dancing crowd. We laughed as I ushered them towards the dance floor, feeling the beat of the music pick me up and led my body into a sway. My friends just laughed as they joined me, dancing to "I Can't Dance" by LMFAO. Ironic. Damon's POV looking hot. Damon, Crystal purred, running her hand along the front of my tux. I forced a smile onto my face, nodding thanks. She looked up at me expectantly, almost as if she was waiting for her own compliment. Probably on the cheap fire truck red dress she was wearing that stretched from her chest down to her ankles. "You ready to go?" I avoided, wrapping my arm around her waist and leading her out of my room and towards the garage, keeping my ears and eyes open for any more warnings. But Ben had assured me that he would hold down the fort until I came back and would alert me immediately if there was any sign of a single rogue. Crystal pouted as she glanced up at me from the corner of her eye, clearly annoyed I hadn't paid much attention to her. My God, I thought the girl was supposed to be smart. How could she not have noticed that I was using her? I figured she would have caught on about now. Whatever. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. When we walked into the garage, I noticed Dan's car was gone and figured he and the girls had already headed to the dance. Great. That means less chance of seeing them. Just what I need right about now. And maybe. The moment we arrived at the dance, Crystal and I were swarmed by either my friends, or by hers. I was about to just stomp over them to get to a freak-in chair. I wussed one for attention, but Crystal clearly wasn't. She gladly accepted every ounce of compliment and praise that was thrown at her when we walked through the doors. Eventually, I was able to push my way through them and leave Crystal to be receiving the attention she so badly wanted. However, as I made my way towards the chairs that circled decorated tables, a flash of silver caught my eye. I turned to see a slim figure swaying seductively to the music, her back to me, but it didn't take Sherlock Holmes to find out exactly who she was. KC's cream-clad black dress outlined her body so perfectly that it actually forced a whimper from my wolf. About time you showed up. Dance smirked, Amber under his arm and glaring viciously at me. Crystal demanded to be fashionably late. I muttered, watching Amber's jaw tighten, but Dan just nodded. Girls, Dan rolled his eyes. I would know. In Friends with 5 of them, winning an elbow in the gut from Amber. They both chuckled before Dan waved me off, heading to the cluster of tables with his mate. I noticed he sat down at one of the closer tables that Danica was already sitting at, a cup in one hand. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing shoots enthusiasm. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing shoots enthusiasm. Can I have your attention, please? I turned towards the front of the gym where a platform had been set up. Diana was at the microphone, a silver envelope in her hands. She smiled at the crowd warmly as they quieted down, the music coming to a stop. I would like to announce the king and queen of the prom. That's when it became as silent as the grave. Well, I'll tell you, it was real close. Her smile almost seemed sly, like she was cunning something. Well, now I know where Casey got her trickery from. But I am pleased to announce that our king of the night is... She paused, opening the envelope. Damon fell on, her eyes immediately connected with mine, glinting mysteriously. I felt a shiver crawl up my spine as I puffed out an aggravated sigh before forcing a smile as I made my way stiffly towards the stage. I climbed the steps and stood beside Diana, the assistant principal placing the plastic crown on my head. I noticed Crystal already grinning wildly, knowing she had just officially won the title of queen. And our beautiful queen this evening is... She opened the envelope and her eyes seemed to illuminate a glow. KC Players E. KCSP. Oh the what? Crystal screamed, her face turning the same color as her dress. My jaw hanging open in shock. It took me a second to recover, but I numbly approached the stage, my heels clapping against the metallic stairs. I was instantly greeted with a hug from my mother before a silver tiara was placed on my head. You'll thank me later, Mum whispered in my ear. I looked at her with a confused look, but she only smiled in return as the music started playing again. Except this time it was like Ships in the Night by McCurney. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing shoots enthusiasm. The annual king and queen slow dance. Just my luck. I glared over at Damon, hoping he was going to risk Canon by grabbing my hand. He just glared back, his arms crossed and a grave look shadowing his face. Take her hand, man. A masculine voice yelled over the silence. I gazed out over towards where the shout came from and was at all surprised to see Dan, a wide and wacky grin on his face, spreading from ear to ear. I felt my face turn red as Dan began chanting, Dance, 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 dance. Soon, everyone in the gym was chanting. Well, everyone except Crystal. Oh, and Justin her. My mother gave me a gentle shove and I tripped in the heels, falling right into Damon who wrapped his arms securely around me, keeping me on my legs. The chanting picked up and, as if we were under a trance, Damon led me onto the dance floor under the spotlight, wrapping an arm around my waist, his other hand interlocking fingers with mine, my hand appearing on his shoulder. The next moment, we were slowly swaying to Ships in the Night, other couples doing the same around us, including Dan and Amber. Move your hand any lower, I tear it off, I threatened, his fingers briefly brushing my butt. He grunted, showing that he was even interested. I could see the onyx already trying to win over his iris color, his instincts battling to win. Not that it was any easier for me, it took all the willpower. I had to restrain my wolf from pressing my waist any closer to his than it already was. Don't flatter yourself, Glazy, Damon grumbled, moving his hand farther up my waist. I rolled my eyes, feeling the tension in his arm. Please. If there's anything that's flattering me right now, it's your arm around my waist. Using the moment to play the cards. This was sure to drive him off the deep end. He stiffened and I inched closer to him, feeling his palms begin to sweat. Or was it my own? I think you're either one making me look good. His eyebrows, slightly rising. Firing back is he. Let's see about that. To my agent extraordinaire, Mylin Nilbe. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I whispered, bringing my lips up to the crook of his neck, blowing hot air against his skin, a shiver vibrating through him. Because I'm pretty sure at your hand on my ass, I whispered, noting that his hand had actually slid back down, possibly self-consciously. I looked up at him and noticed his eyes were solid pitch black. I felt my breathing hitch as Damon clutched my hand tightly, using his werewolf speed to drag me out of the building unseen and into the woods that surrounded the school, pressing me up against the trunk of a large oak tree. You're mine, the elf growled, most certainly more wolf than man. He crashed his lips against mine and it felt like fireworks were exploding inside me, far more powerful than the little electric shocks physical contact brings. My legs gave out and Damon was quick to support me, pressing himself against my body. I felt his hand caressing the back of my head, and the next moment my hair was cascading down my shoulders messily, the clip resting on the forest floor behind him. My hands flew to his tie, struggling to get it off. In the end, I tore it right off his neck, doing the same to his jacket and shirt. I ran my hands along his bare chest while oblivious to the fact that my dress was lying by my feet, leaving me in nothing but my undergarments. We tore away from each other, gasping in air, and instantly his lips were caressing my neck, leaving a trail of heat over my skin. I gasped when he playfully nipped my shoulder, his hands traveling up my sides. His fingers brushed along my butt as he returned his right hand to my thigh, wrapping my leg around his waist. With his other hand, he possessively gripped my wrist, pinning it against the bark above my head. With my free hand, I ran my fingers through his hair, my wolf aroused and excited to be in the strong and powerful embrace of my controlling and possessive alpha mate. I felt Damon's hot breath fell against my ear as his lips dragging along my soft skin. Who's your alpha? Nipping my ear, the heat of his breath on my skin making me anxious. I stuttered, unable to form any words. Only a moan escaped. Why, you are my alpha, I gasped, tilting my head back, my canines extending to full wolfish length, my eyes beginning to slightly burn as though a fire had been lit behind them. A low chuckle echoed from Damon as he kissed my shoulder, the temperature suddenly seeming to rise dramatically. Then, his canines pierced my flesh, drawing blood. I let out a moan, feeling Damon's rough tongue lap at the puncture marks in my shoulder, the spot where he had marked me. My legs completely buckled beneath me, and Damon caught me in his arms, laying me on the ground, his large body straddling me. My body was exploding with a tremendous heat, a fire burning in the pit of my stomach. A loud moan ripped away from my felt Dame and brushed against my most feminine parts, the feeling of ice water being poured down my burning back. I flinched, something eating furiously at my nerves, trying to tear me away from this embrace. This closeness was with Damon. My hand flew to the mark on my shoulder, the physical mark that made me property to Damon, which officially labeled me as his mate. As Lunar. With all the force I could muster up, I pushed Damon back off of me, watching hurt and confusion flash across his face quickly before I sprinted off, grabbing the only article of clothing in reach, which of course had to be Damon's shirt. At that moment, I didn't care. All that mattered was that I put as much distance as I could between me and Damon. Unfortunately, it could never be far enough. I ran blindly through the forest, somehow able to jump over logs and avoid low-hanging tree limbs, only able to feel the cool air against my face and the leafy wooden floor beneath my feet. But that air abruptly ended with some moans of something's stone-hard chest. I stumbled backward, falling flat on my back, my hand flying to my nose, which was gushing blood. Glancing up, I met a pair of cold, icy blue eyes that chilled me to the bone. "Hey there, little wolf," he grinned, his white teeth flashing under the moonlight that forced its way through the trees. "What are you doing all the way out here in the big bad forest?" His voice was gruff and threatening, draped in insanity. I scooted back away from him, too confused and lost to think about what to do, only to react. I was suddenly yanked to my feet by my hair from behind, but before I could spin around to see my second assailant, a fist with the force of a freight train landed across my face, engulfing my vision with endless darkness, all my senses fading away as I fell unconscious. Don't get left behind. Subscribe to follow the pack's thrilling journey.